My name is Eleanor Hardigan, and I was 27 the winter I drove myself to my last round of chemo, because my mother said my sister only gets engaged once. The passenger seat was empty, the way it had stayed for all 5 rounds before it. On the back of my left hand was a bruise the color of a plum, where the needle kept blowing the same tired vein, and in the glove box was a sealed manila envelope with 2 words on it in my own handwriting: Chair 4. It rode around in my car for 2 years before anyone but me knew what was inside. 2 winters after that drive, my mother and my father and my sister would walk into a bright hospital lobby, looking for a small brass plaque with our family name on it. They would find a wall of granite instead. And when my mother read what was carved across the top of it, she would not be able to make a sound. But that part comes later. I'm 29 now, and I can tell the whole thing without my voice shaking, which I could not have promised you back in that car. I didn't scream that morning. I didn't beg. I drove down North High Street in the kind of January snow that doesn't really fall. It just hangs there, gray in the air, and waits for you. I counted the stoplights to stay level, 11 of them, from our street in Clintonville to the parking garage at the medical center. I knew the number by heart by then: 11 lights, 4 floors of garage, 6 floors of elevator. That was the route to Chair 4. The cancer center was on the 6th floor of Olentangy Regional, the big campus across the river. I could have found the infusion room blindfolded by the smell of it alone, that cold, clean smell of antiseptic and warm cotton blankets that I can still call up if I close my eyes. My nurse was named Donna. She was somewhere near 60, with reading glasses on a little beaded chain and hands that never once missed the vein on the first try. Even when mine were doing their best to hide, she called everybody honey. But she said my name like it actually meant something, which is more than I can say for some of the people who put it on my birth certificate. There were 8 chairs in that room, big vinyl recliners the color of cold oatmeal, and beside every one of them, a regular chair pulled up close for whoever came along. A husband with a thermos, a grown daughter scrolling her phone, a friend with a paperback turned face down on her knee. On the bad days, I used to count the chairs that had a person in them. Most days it was 6 out of 8, sometimes 7. The empty one was always the one right next to me. Chair 4 was mine, by the window with a view of the parking garage roof and a thin strip of sky. 4 hours around, give or take, while the bag dripped and the pump beside me beeped its slow, patient beep. You learn to bring your own quiet to a place like that. I got very good at it. Down the hall from the infusion room, there was a door I passed on every single visit. Frosted glass, a dull brass handle, and a small sign screwed into the frame. Naming committee. It was always locked. I never once saw it open, not in 6 rounds. No patient went in there, no family went in. Not one nurse I asked could tell me what happened behind that glass. I decided it was the room where the hospital chose whose name went on what. And then I forgot about it, because I had no reason in the world to think it had anything to do with me. To understand that empty chair, you have to understand the house I came up in, a 2-bedroom bungalow off North High, the kind Clintonville is full of, with a porch my father never got around to fixing and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee left too long on the burner. Roy and Diane Hardigan, married 34 years, 2 daughters, and a ranking system nobody ever wrote down, but everybody could read off the wall like a thermostat. Everyone called me Nell. I was the strong one. That was the word they used. Strong, like it was a gift they were giving me, when what they really meant was useful. When the water heater quit, I was the one who called the plumber and wrote the $400 check. When my father's truck needed a transmission, I quietly covered the gap and never once saw it again. I was the daughter you called when something broke at 2 in the morning. My sister Brooke was the one you called when something good happened, 2 years younger and lit up from the inside in a way I never managed. People turned toward her in a room without deciding to, and my parents turned the hardest of anyone. Brooke didn't fix things. Brooke never had to. As far as I could ever tell, her whole job in that family was to be happy somewhere they could watch her do it. "You're the strong one, Nell," my mother liked to say, usually right after asking me for something. "Brooke just feels things harder than you do." She said it like it settled the matter. For most of my life, I tried to make myself necessary, because in that house, necessary was the closest a person could get to loved. When Brooke got engaged that December, the whole bungalow rearranged itself overnight. My father, who I'd never once seen track $1 of his own retirement, suddenly had a yellow legal pad on the kitchen table with Brooke's wedding written across the top in block letters and numbers running down the side. The venue, the deposit, the dress. At Sunday dinner, he read the down payment on the reception hall out loud like a score he was proud of. $8,400, he said, tapping the pad with his pen, and that's just to hold the date. My mother beamed. Brooke beamed. I passed the potatoes. Nobody at that table had the faintest idea what a single round of my treatment cost, because nobody had ever asked. I knew. I had every figure, every copay, every drive, every date. I was keeping them in a manila envelope in my glove box, the way you keep things you cannot yet say out loud. The morning of my last round, my phone started buzzing in the cup holder before I even reached the garage. The family chat. I made myself wait until I was settled in chair 4. Line in, first bag started before I looked. It was photographs, a dozen of them, maybe more. Brooke at a brunch somewhere bright and warm, a champagne flute in one hand and a new diamond catching the light on the other. Somebody had strung a paper banner behind her. She said yes in gold letters. My mother had sent most of the pictures. My father sent a little gray thumbs up. Brooke sent a row of hearts. Then my mother typed a sentence where every single person in that chat could see it. "Wish you could be here, sweetie, but you understand. She only gets engaged once." I read it twice while the bag dripped into my plum-colored hand. Donna came by and asked if I was warm enough, and I told her yes. Somewhere across the city, my whole family was lifting glasses in a sunny room. I was in chair 4 with a needle in a vein that did not want it. I typed back exactly one thing, a thumbs up, the same little gray thumb my father had sent. Then I turned the phone face down on the armrest and watched the medicine go in, drop by drop. I didn't cry. People always expect the crying. I just went very quiet and very clear, the way the air gets right before the temperature drops. When the last bag ran empty, Donna unhooked me and pressed a cotton ball to the back of my hand and taped it down with that brown medical tape that pulls when it comes off. "You're all done, honey," she said, and her eyes went a little wet. My nurse. The only person in that whole building who cried for me that day, and she had known me 11 weeks. I thanked her. I rode the elevator down 6 floors by myself, walked across the cold garage to my car, and sat there a minute with both hands on the wheel. Not crying, just sitting. Here is the thing nobody warns you about being the strong one. People stop checking. They build a tidy little story about you, that you have got it handled, that you do not need what everyone else needs, and then they get to keep believing it, because you are too proud to tell them otherwise. For all 6 rounds, I drove myself there and drove myself home. I set up a folding tray by my bed with saltines and ginger ale, and the pills for the nausea lined up like soldiers. I figured out which window got the morning sun, so I could lie in that warm square on the worst days. My phone did not ring much. When it did, it was my mother, and it was about the wedding. Somewhere in those weeks, I stopped listening for the door. That is the part I can tell you the exact night of. Round 4, late, the apartment dark except for the kitchen light. I caught myself lying there with my head turned toward the front door, listening the way I had been listening my whole life, waiting for someone to come in and sit down in the empty chair, and I just stopped. I turned my head back to the wall. I drank my ginger ale. I let the door be a door. That spring, in a small exam room, alone, a doctor used the word I had been driving 11 stoplights toward for months. Remission. No cake. No banner in gold letters. No family chat lighting up. I said thank you, and I went back to work that same afternoon because I did not know what else to do with my hands. What I did not tell a living soul, not my mother, not Brooke, not anyone who shared my last name, was that somewhere between chair 4 and that little exam room, I had quietly started building something. It was small. It was boring. It lived on my laptop in spreadsheets that looked like nothing at all to anyone glancing over my shoulder. And it was going to rewrite the entire afternoon, 2 winters down the road, when my family came walking into a hospital lobby looking for a brass plaque with their name on it. But first I had to learn how to be wanted by no one, and fine with it. That took longer than the building did. The first months after remission, I kept waiting to feel like I had won something. People say you beat it the way they'd say it about a team, like there was a ribbon stretched across the end of a track and a crowd on its feet. There was no ribbon. There was my apartment off Chemo Avenue, the same warm square of morning sun on the floorboards, and a body that had to learn how to be a body again. I lost the rest of my hair to that last round, and then watched it come back in soft and a little gray at the temples, and I let it stay gray. 27 with gray coming in at the sides. I decided it suited me. I had earned every strand of it. I went back to my job at a billing office off Henderson Road on the north side of Columbus, a 10-minute drive from the apartment. I reconciled medical claims for a cluster of small clinics. 8 hours a day of codes and co-pays and denials, deciding which line on a statement belonged to the patient and which belonged to the insurance company. I had done that exact work for years before I ever got sick. The strange part, the part I never said to anyone, was that being a patient had made me better at it. I had lived down inside those statements now. I knew precisely what it felt like to be the number printed at the very bottom of the page, the one with your name beside it and the 2 small words, amount due. The family chat kept going the whole time. I want you to understand that it never stopped. It just stopped being about me. It had been about Brooke's engagement, and then it was about the venue, the florist, the seating chart, the band versus the DJ. My mother would send a photo of a cake at 11 at night, and 7 hearts would land under it before midnight. Once, in April, my phone rang and it was Diane, my mother, and for one foolish second my chest went tight with hope. She wanted to know if I thought ivory or champagne for the table linens. She did not ask how I was. I told her champagne. I was right, as it happened. They went with ivory anyway, so I muted the chat. That was the smallest thing, a little switch in a menu, and it was the first decision in my whole life I made purely for myself. The wedding kept happening somewhere behind that switch, and I stopped having to watch it in real time. I stopped setting my evenings around the buzz of it. I had a lot of quiet evenings to fill after that, and I started filling them at my own kitchen table in Clintonville, with my own bills from Olentangy Regional spread out in front of me in the lamplight. Because here is what I had learned the hard way. The bottom number is wrong more often than anyone tells you. I went through my own statements line by line, the way I went through everyone else's at work, and I found it. A claim the insurer had underpaid by $400 and quietly closed. A code keyed 1 digit off so a covered drug came back, denied. A drive, a copay, a date. Every one of them logged in my own hand on the pages I kept in that sealed manila envelope in my glove box, the one with the 2 words on the front, chair 4. I had been keeping receipts on my own life because nobody else was going to, and sitting there at that table, it occurred to me that the clinics I reconciled for were losing the same money every single week and just eating it, because no one had the time to chase $400 across 10,000 claims. So I built something that would. I taught myself the parts I didn't already know, nights and weekends, a plain little program that read the insurer's remittance files and flagged every claim that had been short paid or wrongly denied, the ones worth appealing. Nothing clever, nothing anybody would put on a magazine cover. It just did, automatically and without getting tired, the one boring thing I happened to be very good at. I ran it against the 3 clinics I already handled, quietly, after hours. In the first month, it found $11,000 those clinics were owed and had written off as gone. I called it reconcile. I told myself it was because that was the whole job, taking two numbers that disagreed and making them agree. That was most of why. The rest of why is a word I needed in more than one room of my life and was only ever going to get in one of them. I registered it as a real company at the county offices downtown on a gray Tuesday on my lunch break. And from the very first day, I kept the books the way I keep everything, airtight. Every dollar in and every dollar out, dated, backed by a document, and the important pages notarized because once, the single time in my life it mattered most, the only record of what I was owed had been one envelope in my own handwriting, riding around in a glove box. I was never going to be in that position again. If I ever stood in a room and said, "This is mine, this is what I did," I wanted stone under my feet and not my word against theirs. Reconcile grew the way that kind of thing grows, which is to say, slowly and then not slowly. 3 clinics became 9. 9 became a hospital group out in Dublin that paid a monthly fee. I hired 2 people, then 4. I was still driving the same car with the same envelope in the glove box. I told my family none of it. Not because it was a grand secret yet. There was just no one on the other end of the line asking what I did with my days, and I had stopped volunteering it. When you are the strong one, people assume you are fine. And being fine, it turns out, is a very good place to build something where nobody is watching. You might think the hard part of this story was the money. It wasn't. The money was the easy part, and it came faster than I have made it sound. In the autumn of the second year, a health technology company out of the East Coast offered to buy Reconcile outright. Their people flew into Columbus, and we sat in a glass room on the 19th floor of a building downtown, with the Scioto River bending silver below us, and they slid a number across the table. I did not let my face move. I had gotten very, very good at not letting my face move in a vinyl recliner the color of cold oatmeal years before. I asked for a day. I read every page myself that night. I had a lawyer read it twice. Then I signed. The morning the deal closed, a wire landed in an account with my name on it. A single line on a screen, a number with 7 figures sitting in front of the decimal point. It was more money than my father had earned in his entire working life, with the truck and the overtime and all of it added together. I sat in my apartment off Chemo Avenue and looked at it for a long while. Then I made myself a piece of toast and went to work because the deal had a transition period and I had people counting on me to not vanish. I told no one in my family. The chat that day was about whether the groomsmen should wear gray or navy. I did not weigh in. I want to be honest about what having that money felt like because it was not what I expected. I expected to feel powerful. Mostly I felt quiet. I had spent my whole life trying to be necessary to people who only called when something broke, and now I had the one thing that, in that house, had always counted as love: money. A great deal of it. And the strange level realization that came over me that autumn was that I no longer wanted to spend $1 of it making those particular people want me. That want had finally just gone out, the way a pilot light goes out, with no drama at all. I did not feel cold about it. I felt free. So I had to decide what the money was actually for, and I already knew. I think I had known since the night in round 4, when I turned my head away from the door and let it be a door. I drove myself back to Olentangy Regional on a Wednesday in November. The same 11 stoplights down North High Street, the same parking garage, the same elevator up. But I did not go to the 6th floor. I went to the 2nd, to a hallway of offices behind the lobby, and I asked the woman at the desk if I could speak with someone in the hospital foundation about making a gift. That is how I met Marcus Webb. He was the foundation's development director, somewhere in his 50s, in a brown suit, a little behind the times, with a soft voice and the careful manner of a man who has spent his career being trusted with other people's money and other people's grief. He had a corner office with a window that looked out, of all the directions it could have looked, at the parking garage roof. The same thin strip of sky I had watched from chair 4 for 4 hours at a time, I noticed that, and I did not say anything about it. He poured me a cup of coffee from a pot on a side table and asked what he could do for me, and I think he expected me to say I wanted to give a few thousand in memory of someone. People did that. It was a kind hospital, and people were grateful. I told him I wanted to fund a new infusion wing, the whole thing. New chairs, more of them, every single one of them set by a window with a real view and not a wall. I told him I wanted it built where the old 6th floor unit was, and the old unit folded into it, so that the room with chair 4 in it became part of something bigger and brighter. I told him the number I was prepared to give. Marcus Webb set his coffee down very slowly and did not pick it up again for some time. He asked, gently, whether I had a connection to the oncology program. I said I had been a patient there. He asked if I would like the wing named for me or for a loved one. That is when I told him I wanted the gift to be anonymous. He blinked at that. He told me, kindly, that donors at this level almost always wanted their name on the building, that recognition was usually part of why people gave. I told him recognition was not why I was giving. Not yet. I said it just like that. Not yet. And I am not sure he understood it, but he wrote it down. There was one more thing I told him, and this was the part that mattered most to me. I wanted a fund built into the gift, a standing one that did something very specific. For any patient who came through that wing for treatment and had no one with them, no spouse, no parent, no friend in the chair pulled up alongside, I wanted their share of the cost quietly covered, the co-pays, the parking, the things that pile up on the bottom line for the people who are already carrying the whole thing by themselves. I wanted it to renew every year and match whatever other gifts came in, so it would outgrow me and keep going after I was gone. I had the documentation, I told him, every category of cost, itemized, from a patient who had finished alone and written all of it down. I did not tell him the patient was me, or that the documentation was an envelope in my glove box. I just said I could provide it. Marcus Webb looked at me for a moment with something I had not seen aimed at me in a very long time, which was a kind of plain respect, the kind that does not need anything from you. He said the hospital would be honored. He said a gift of this size would have to go before the board, and that the naming and the terms would all be set down in something called a gift agreement, signed and filed and made part of the permanent record of the institution. Words on the record, he said, not a check that clears and disappears, something that stays. On my way back to the elevator, I passed it, the door with the frosted glass and the dull brass handle and the little sign screwed into the frame, Naming Committee. It was closed, the way it was always closed. I had walked past it on every visit for 6 rounds and never once seen it open, never known what was decided behind that glass or by whom. I slowed down in front of it. Marcus had said the naming and the terms would be set by a committee. I stood there a second longer than I needed to, and then I went home and I told no one where I had been. I thought that would be the end of how my family fit into any of this, that I would build the thing quietly in another part of the city, in a year of my life they were not paying attention to, and that the wedding would happen and the wing would open and the two would never touch. Then, 3 weeks before Brooke's wedding, my phone rang, and it was my mother, and for the first time in 2 years, she wanted something from me that was not ivory or champagne. I let the phone ring 3 times before I answered it. That was new. The old me, the one who lived to be needed, would have had it to my ear before the first ring finished, braced to fix whatever had broken on the other end. I sat at the kitchen table in the lamplight with my own books open in front of me, and I watched her name sit on the screen, Mom, and I let it ring, and only then did I pick up. Her voice came through warm. I knew that warmth. It was the warmth she used when she needed something, the kind with a floor built under it that you could feel through the phone, a thing made to hold weight. She asked me how I was. She had not asked me how I was in 2 years, and now she asked it twice, and told me I sounded tired, and asked was I eating enough. I sat very still and let her lay the whole table before she set down the plate. The wedding, she finally said. It had gotten away from them a little. The flowers, the second tent in case of rain, the band Brooke had her heart set on instead of the DJ. Your father set aside what he set aside, she said, and it had run $11,000 past it. I almost laughed at that number, quietly on my end, where she could not see my face. 11,000. The first month I ever ran Reconcile, alone at this same table, it had pulled exactly $11,000 out of the air for 3 little clinics that had written it off as gone forever. I knew that number from the inside. I knew exactly how long it took to find and how little it took to lose. Everyone was pitching in, she said. Aunt Carol, the Dunmores from next door, even your father's brother, and you, she said. And then she said the thing she had driven the whole call to say. You don't have a wedding of your own to be saving for, sweetheart. You've only got yourself. Family helps family. She only gets married once. There it was. A small turned version of the sentence she had handed me through a closed door 2 winters back, the one about how a person only gets engaged once. The words had barely changed at all, only the verb had moved over. I asked her, evenly, whether they had ever settled the deposit on the band or gone back to the DJ in the end. I knew the answer. I had watched that exact argument scroll past in the family chat for a week before I muted it. The band against the DJ, 40 messages a day, hearts and small wars. I only wanted to hear whether she remembered that I would have no way of knowing any of it unless I had been watching from somewhere out of sight. She paused, just slightly, and said the band, and moved right past the pause. So I said no. I did not raise my voice. I have never once raised my voice in this whole story, and I was not going to begin at my own kitchen table. I just said, no, I'm not able to help with that, in the same flat, level tone I had used to tell a man in a glass room downtown that I would need a day to think. There was a silence on the line, and then the warmth went out of her voice the way it always did the second it stopped working, all at once, like a thrown switch. After everything this family has done for you, she said, I let that sit. I have learned that you do not have to answer a sentence like that one. You can simply let it be in the room with both of you until its own weight bends it down. I thought about the empty chairs in a 6th-floor waiting room. I thought about driving myself home with a cotton ball taped into the crook of my arm, 11 stoplights down North High Street, and no casserole on the step when I got there. I did not say any of it out loud. I just said, I hope the wedding is beautiful, Mom. And I meant it, even. And I ended the call. I sat there for a while afterward. I kept waiting to feel something sharp, some hot flush of triumph or some answering pull of guilt, and it did not come. What came instead was that same level quiet I had felt the morning the wire landed in my account. The pilot light was out. I have tried a lot of ways to describe it since, and that is still the truest one. There had been a small blue flame in me that burned my whole life long to keep those particular people warm, and at some point, with no hiss and no smell of gas, it had simply gone out, and the house had not turned cold. I went to bed early. I slept all the way through the night, which I had not done in longer than I could remember. The next morning, I did one thing before work. I took a single card out of a box of them the foundation had printed, heavy cream stock with the hospital's name across the top and a date and a time below, an invitation to the dedication of the new infusion wing at Olentangy Regional. There was no donor name anywhere on the card. The gift was anonymous, and the card said nothing about who had given it. I addressed one envelope by hand to the bungalow on Weisheimer Road, the house I grew up in, where my parents still lived and where Brooke would be married out of in 3 weeks. I did not put a note inside. I did not write one word of my own anywhere on it. I drove it to the blue mailbox on North High Street near the coffee shop, and I let it drop through the slot, and I heard it land among the others. And then I went to work and reconciled claims all day, like it was any other Tuesday. You have probably already guessed why I sent it. You are close. What you have not guessed yet is the order, and the order is the whole thing. My mother called twice that week to ask why on earth they had been sent an invitation to a hospital event. What was it? Did I know anything about it? Was it some kind of community drive? I let both calls go to voicemail, and I did not call back. Let her wonder. Wondering was a thing I had done a great deal of alone in a vinyl recliner the color of cold oatmeal, and I found that I did not mind handing a little of it back across the city. The wing took the better part of that year to build. They put it up where the old 6th-floor unit had been, just as I had asked, and they folded the old unit into it so that the little room with chair 4 in it stopped being a separate sad place at the end of a hall and became one bright corner of something with twice the light. I went down to Olentangy Regional more often than I had any real reason to. I would park in the same garage and ride up and stand in the half-built wing in a borrowed hard hat, looking at where the windows were going, every chair set to face real glass and real sky and never again a wall. One afternoon, a young nurse came through with a clipboard and saw me standing there and asked, kindly, if I was lost, if I was looking for someone. I said no, I was just visiting. She had no idea who I was. She had no reason to. I liked it that way. I told her the windows were going to be wonderful, and she smiled and said she could not wait, that the chairs they had now faced a wall, and she said it like a small daily sorrow she had stopped noticing she carried. I thought, you will not have to carry it much longer. I did not say that either. Marcus Webb walked the wing with me most times, in his brown suit with his soft, careful voice, telling me what the board had signed off on and what still had to go before the committee. Because there were things that had to go before the committee, the wording most of all. Every word that was going to be cut into the stone of the donor wall had to be submitted, in writing, and approved behind the frosted glass door on the 2nd floor with the dull brass handle, the one with the small sign screwed into the frame that read, Naming Committee. I had walked past that door, closed, on every single visit through 6 rounds of treatment and never once known what was decided behind it, or by whom. It was still closed every time I passed it now, but the short line I had written for the wall, the words I wanted set beneath my name where every patient and every family in that wing would read them for as long as the building stood, those words had gone in through that door, and they had come back to me approved. I am not going to tell you yet what they said. You will read them at the very moment my family reads them, and not one breath before, because that is the only fair way left to do it. I signed the gift agreement in Marcus Webb's office on a Thursday. It was a thick document, every page initialed in the corner, the naming terms spelled out in plain legal language, the standing fund described in full, the matching clause, the yearly renewal, all of it. Marcus had a notary come in, a quiet woman with a stamp in a worn leather case, exactly the way I had asked, because I do not say a thing is mine, on my word, alone. Not anymore. Not since the only proof of what I was owed once rode around in a glove box in an envelope I had labeled in my own hand. She pressed her seal into the last page, and it left a small raised circle in the paper, and Marcus filed the original with the hospital and with the board, where it would live in the permanent record of the institution. Words on the record, he had told me, that first gray day. Not a check that clears and disappears. Something that stays. I ran my thumb across that raised seal once before I let the page go, and then it was winter again. A third one now, stacked up behind the 2 that had come before, since the night I drove myself to chair 4 in the dark with nobody in the passenger seat. Here was another one coming down North High Street with the same thin, gray light I knew by heart. The wing was finished. The chairs were in, every one of them turned to face the windows. The donor wall was up beside the entrance to the wing, a single broad panel of pale granite, the letters cut deep and filled and set, permanent and covered for the morning of the dedication by a simple drape of cloth until the moment came to draw it back. I sent no second invitation and no reminder. I did not need to. People like my family always come to a thing with a ribbon on it. There's a kind of person who will not cross a single room for you while you are the number printed at the bottom of a page, and who will drive clear across a city in their good coat for a ceremony with coffee and a folded program and the chance to stand near something that looks important. I knew exactly which kind I was related to. I had counted on it, the way you count on a season to turn. The morning of the dedication, I arrived early, before the doors were open to anyone, and I stood at the back of the new wing in a plain dark dress, with my gray coming in soft at the temples, the gray I had earned and kept, and I watched the lobby through the glass. At a few minutes past 10, I saw them come in, my father, Roy, first, holding the door, heavier than I remembered him, and a little stooped in his good coat. Then Brooke, married now, glowing the way she had always glowed, a ring catching the overhead light as she lifted a hand to her hair. And then my mother, Diane, in the cream-colored coat she saved for occasions, looking around the lobby with bright social eyes, already smiling at strangers, already at home in a room that was about to be about something she did not understand. I watched the three of them stop just inside the doors and look around, and I knew exactly what they were doing, because Marcus had told me once it was the most common thing in the world. They were looking for the plaque. They were scanning the walls of that bright lobby for some small brass square with a family name on it, something modest and tasteful in theirs, because somewhere in the 3 weeks since that card had dropped through the slot, they had decided, the way my family had always decided everything, that this had to be about them. That somehow, by some arithmetic only they could follow, they had been brought across the city to be thanked. They were looking in the wrong room. They were looking too low, and they had no idea yet whose name they were about to have to read, or what was waiting in cut stone just under it. Marcus Webb reached them before I did. I watched him cross the lobby in his brown suit, unhurried, the way he moved through every room he had ever entered, and I saw him stop in front of my father and offer his hand. Roy took it and stood a little straighter, the way a man stands when someone official has singled him out of a crowd. I could not hear the words through the glass, but I knew their shape. He was telling them the dedication would begin shortly. He was asking would they like to come through, and yes, of course, the family was welcome near the front. My mother lifted one hand to her hair. Brooke smoothed the line of her coat, and the three of them followed Marcus toward the new wing, like people who had finally been told the room had been holding a place for them all along. They were not wrong about the place. They were only wrong about the name that would be over it. I came in the sideway, the way the nurses came in, past the alcove of folded gowns and the sanitizer pump on the wall, and I took a spot standing at the back of the small gathered crowd, where the light from the new windows did not quite reach. There was one thing I had done that morning that nobody had watched me do. Before I drove in, I had sat in my car in the garage with the engine ticking and reached into the glove box and taken out the envelope I had kept there for 2 years. Heavy manila, soft at the corners now from handling, one word across the front in my own block letters. Inside, it was a logbook, not a journal, nothing soft like that. A ledger, ruled and itemized the way I itemize everything, every infusion by date, the dose, the chair number, the time the drip started and the time it ended, the mileage there and back, and in a thin column down the right side, the seats. How many seats in the waiting room had been meant for someone of mine and had stayed empty? I had a number for every visit. I had kept it the way you keep a receipt, because I learned young that the only thing that ever holds in my family is a thing written down and dated, and because I had decided, somewhere around the 4th round, that one day this account would be settled in a currency that was not tears. Clipped behind the last page was a second piece of paper, older, the ink gone slightly brown. It was the first receipt from the fund. 2 years ago, with no real money to my name yet, only the thin recovered dollars that my little program clawed back out of denied claims, I had opened a quiet account at the foundation, a matching pool, so that the next person who sat down in that corner of the sixth floor and could not pay would never see the bill that came after. I had fed it every month since, before the acquisition, before the wire, before any of the rest of it, in amounts so small no one would ever have looked twice. The envelope was the wound, and it was also the seed, kept in the same dark glove box, riding around the city under the registration in the ice scraper. That morning, I had read it through one last time, and then I had folded it closed and slid it into the inside pocket of my coat, because the stone was about to say all of it out loud, permanently, and a thing that is cut into granite does not need to ride around in a car anymore. I could feel the soft corner of it against my chest while I stood at the back and watched my family find their seats in the front row. Marcus stepped up to a small lectern beside the draped wall. There was no microphone and no music, only his quiet voice carrying in a room that had been built to be calm. He thanked the board. He thanked the nurses, several of whom stood along the side in their scrubs, and one of them, the young one with the clipboard, who had once asked me if I was lost, looked down and smiled at her shoes. Then he said that every wing like this one begins as a single gift, and that the hospital keeps a formal record of such gifts, and that he would read, as was the custom at a dedication, from the donor naming record exactly as it had been filed and approved by the committee. He took a single sheet from a folder. My mother sat with her chin lifted and her social smile already in place, her eyes drifting toward the draped granite as if her own name might be about to come loose from behind that cloth. He read the date the agreement had been signed. He read the legal name of the fund. And then he read, in that same even voice he used for everything, that the led benefactor of the new infusion wing at Olentangy Regional, the principal donor whose gift had built it and whose endowment would keep it standing for as long as there were patients to fill it, was Eleanor Hartigan. I watched the back of my mother's head. I watched it the way you watch a glass that has just gone over the edge of a counter, in that long, slow half-second before it reaches the floor. She did not turn around. None of them turned around, not at first, because the name had not yet found its place in them. Eleanor. For a few seconds, it was only a name in a room. Then I saw my father's shoulders go still, and I saw Brooke's bright head tip very slightly to one side, and I saw my mother's spine straighten past social and into something rigid, and I knew the name had landed where it lived. Eleanor. Not a stranger from some other part of the city they could go home and feel grateful to. Me. The daughter who never needed anything. The one who drove herself. Marcus set the sheet down. He nodded to the two nurses at the corners of the drape, and they drew the cloth back from the wall, and it came away clean and slid to the floor, and the granite was there in the window light, pale and broad and final. My name was at the top, cut deep into the stone and filled, the letters the height of a hand, Eleanor Hartigan, and under it the two words my family had no way to read the way they were meant. The words I had carried inside me since the sixth floor and had never once said aloud. Because every name on that wall had gone before a committee, and every word beneath my name had been chosen by a person and approved at a long table behind a frosted door, and the line I had asked them to cut, the line that had come back to me stamped and permitted, read, under my name, for the whole wing to read for as long as the building stood. For everyone who finished alone. 2 winters before, a sentence had been pushed at me through a closed bedroom door, a sentence about how a certain day comes only once in a life, and so everyone must be there to see it. I had carried that sentence through 6 rounds of treatment in a vinyl chair the color of cold weather, and when they finally handed me a wall and asked what it should say, I did not write a word about myself, and I did not write a word about them. I wrote the exact opposite of what had come through that door, and I set it in stone for the ones who would come after me, the ones with empty chairs of their own. And then, far down the wall, in the lower band where the small gifts are listed in small letters, 3 columns over and most of the way to the floor, sat another name, Brooke Hartigan. I will tell you how it got there, because the order of those two names is not an accident, and you should know how it happened. A week after that cream-colored card dropped through the mail slot on Weisheimer Road, my mother had called the foundation's gift line, not to ask what the event was. She had already decided what it was. She decided it was important, and that important things should have the family fastened to them. And so she had given a gift, a modest one, a few $100s, the kind of sum she could not find 2 winters ago, when it would have bought nothing grander than her own daughter's name on the bottom of a get well card. She gave it, and she asked that it be recorded under Brooke's name. Brooke, the bride. Brooke, who should have nice things said about her in important rooms. The gift came through the office like any other gift, and it was logged, and it took its place on the wall exactly where its size placed it, down in the small letters near the floor. I saw the entry cross my desk the week it posted. I could have moved it. I could have left it off entirely. I sit at the head of the committee that decides every name on that stone, and not one person at that table would have questioned me if I had quietly set it aside. I let it stand. I let it stand exactly where the amount it was given put it. That was the only thing in this entire story I ever did to her, and I did it by doing nothing at all. Her name is on my wall. It is under mine, by the full height of the stone. She put it there herself, reaching for a plaque, and I simply did not reach out to catch her. My mother found it. I watched her eyes climb to the top of the wall where my name was and hold there, and then drop, foot by foot, all the way down to the small letters where Brooke's name sat below a list of strangers, below the people who had given what little they could, below me, by the whole height of that granite. Her social smile was gone. Her mouth opened slightly and then closed again, and she made no sound at all. And that silence was the loudest thing my mother has ever said to me. Roy looked at the floor between his shoes. Brooke looked at her own name down near the baseboard and then up at mine near the ceiling. And something crossed her face that I think, for the first time in either of our lives, was simple understanding. I did not feel the hot rush I had spent 2 winters bracing myself to feel. What came was quieter than that, and better than that. Something in my chest let go of a weight it had been holding so long it had forgotten it was holding anything at all. I reached up and pressed the soft corner of the envelope flat against my coat. Once, the way you press a hand down to settle something that has finally stopped moving, and I let it be still. Marcus came and found me at the back of the room while the crowd was still quiet. He did not announce me. He only said near my ear that the committee would gather briefly upstairs after the coffee, and would I be coming up, and then he reached over and pushed open the frosted door beside us himself so that I could see in. It was the door I had walked past, closed, through every round of treatment, the one with the small sign screwed into the frame that no patient and no family member is ever invited behind. The long table was in there, and the chairs around it, and at the head of the table sat a folded card with my name printed across it, the seat I take every month when we decide whose name goes on what, and in what order, and what the stone is allowed to say. The room my family was never once asked into was the room I run. I did not go up right away. There was somewhere I wanted to be first. Down the new hall, in the part of the wing that had been the old 6th floor, the chairs were full that morning, because the work of the place does not pause for a ceremony. The matching fund had done its quiet work that very week, the way it does every week now, with no name attached to it anywhere. 2 bays down, a man about my father's age sat halfway through a treatment that, by the arithmetic of his insurance, he should not have been able to afford, and that he would never once learn he had not paid for. The chairs were all turned to the glass now, every single one of them, facing the wide, cold morning instead of a blank wall, the way they never were on the days I sat in them. And beside every station, a second chair had been pulled up and left there on purpose, a standing rule written into how the wing is run, so that no one who comes to this place ever has to sit and count an empty seat the way I once counted mine. I had asked for the second chairs myself. They cost almost nothing. They changed the whole shape of the room. At the entrance to the wing, the granite wall stood in the window light. I stopped in front of it on my way through. I pressed my palm flat to the cold-cut letters of my own name, the full, deep groove of every one of them under my hand, the height of the H, and the first curve of the E against my skin. And I said the only words I spoke aloud that whole morning, low, just for myself. My name is Eleanor Hartigan. Then I walked into the wing, to the corner that used to be chair 4. A young woman was sitting there alone with a line taped into the back of her hand, her coat still on, watching the first of the drips start down the tube, her eyes a little too wide, the way you are the very first time, before you have learned the rhythm of it, when every part of you is braced for something you cannot picture yet. There was no one in the chair beside her. I crossed the bright room and I sat down in it. I asked her her name and she told me, and I stayed. The drip found its rhythm. Outside the wide new window, the third winter came down soft and white over North High Street.